If you guys need more context on what was said and how he said it, here you go.
We have one very big power over China, and that's tariffs. And they don't want them, and I'd rather not have to use it. But it's a tremendous power over China.
Bill Faries, our senior editor, is with us in Singapore. Bill, I got to say, as a headline itself, quite powerful and potent, and you see that really across asset reaction, across global markets right now. How do we read into this?
Yeah, I think it's almost impossible to read too much. I mean, listen, it's been not quite a week yet. I mean, of people expecting a wall of tariffs to come down after President Trump took the oath of office. We haven't seen that, and when he has talked about tariffs, it's been about in regards to Mexico, Canada, and places like Russia. So in that sense, there's been less focus from this administration on China so far, but it also, you could read that 1,000 different ways. One way to read it is he's keeping a little bit of uncertainty out there. It gives him some negotiating room when it comes to working with China on that phase one trade deal that you mentioned earlier and next steps. On the other hand, he does not have arguably his most important economic advisor in office yet, and that's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Could get confirmed this weekend, but he's not there. And if you institute tariffs and there's a big market reaction, you want to have your Treasury Secretary sitting right there to help you figure out how to calm those markets and deal with the response. So markets responding to this comments today, and it's certainly been easier on China than I think some people expected. But it's hard to know whether that means anything for next week or next month.
That's true.
Well, Bill, does it indicate the whipsaw nature of how the markets respond to tariffs, whether they are going to be phased in or all on day one or not on day one or selective? Does that basically indicate that the power of the tariffs and the power of that threat?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, you heard President Trump there saying it's big leverage, and it certainly is. I mean, he talked at one point about putting tariffs as high as 60% on Chinese goods. So, if you're talking about a range that starts low, maybe 10% or less, and then builds up potentially somewhere at 60% for some products, that's a huge amount of space to work with and a huge amount of leverage. I think President Trump is watching closely how markets react. That's one metric he cares about deeply. So I would suspect he's probably holding off as perhaps his aides kind of try to figure out how this would come into play. But it also it's a good negotiating tactic, I think, from his point of view.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing he pointed out in that address at Davos was he wanted lower rates. I mean, many economists would tell you if you wanted lower rates, then don't push through with the tariffs, right, Bill? Bill, while we don't know exactly, and you make a very good point, well, we don't know exactly how the story plays out next week, even tomorrow or next month, I think in one sense, it reminds us that, number one, markets have been pricing for worst-case scenarios, and they're pricing that out slightly right now. It does give us, though, a clue and a glimpse as far as his intentions go and what tariffs really mean, not as an end goal, but really as a negotiating tactic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he sees that. Listen, in his first term, Donald Trump looked at the countries that had the biggest trade deficits with the U.S., and he went after them. It was included, South Korea, Japan, Germany, the EU as a whole, but China, of course, at the top of that list. A lot of those countries are still the same. I think he's talked about the power of tariffs as a negotiating tool, and he'd like to see countries making a response ahead of his decision to implement tariffs or not. And you've actually seen that. You see countries in Asia and you see countries in Europe talking about maybe they're going to start buying more American products, whether it's LNG gas or other types of goods. So it has an impact. He sees that, and he's going to probably look for some results, and then before he makes the decision about whether to go forward and how strong those tariffs come into play.